Yo, what's up, guys? My name is Oliver Hayes with Bus Stampede alongside Leo Rivera and Liam Howard from ScoBuff Sports. And we are at the end of day 3 here at the T-Mobile Center of the Big 12 Championship. And unfortunately, we saw the number 16 seeded Colorado Buffaloes take a loss in the quarterfinals of this tournament to the top seeded Houston Cougars. That was a tough one to watch from a Colorado Buffalo standpoint, just because they played well, they fought hard, but Houston was just so evidently the better team. They out-rebounded the Buffaloes. They only had one fewer turnover than the Buffs, but they shot much better. The ball kind of bounced their way, but, you know, they proved why they're the number 1 seed. They played solid defense. They rebounded well, like I said. But what did you guys take away from that game, especially with Emmanuel Sharp playing in this contest after not playing in the alone matchup during the regular season?
You know, I think the biggest takeaway is the fight that this team has as a whole. The senior leadership, the message that Tad Boyle has been putting into the locker room, putting to his players is resonating. It's sitting with them, and I think that's something you want to take in going to this offseason. Hearing, you know, Tad's post-game remarks, he is very confident in going out, getting more players, and finding the pieces that he feels is going to help support these, you know, sophomores, freshmen who have gotten a lot of playing time in this tournament and who are going to build upon this moving towards the future, Oliver. So I think those are the main optimistic takeaways from this game.
Yeah, I think so, too. This run was definitely inspiring. It speaks to, you know, some of the doubters, especially of Tad Boyle. But, you know, maybe this can make a good impression on some recruits, especially about the culture, you know, that you mentioned, showing the fight after a disappointing season. But one of the young guys, Sebastian Ranchik, went down with an injury. He hurt his knee. As far as we know, the MRI said that it was negative, but we'll have to see what his injury is. But that was one of the negative spots on top of the loss. But, Liam, what was another thing that you saw that stood out for you?
Yeah, I mean, even with Sharp on the floor today, and, you know, that's a different look than they had in the first game, which they did play him close in that game as well. You know, they were still able to fight back. Although the second half didn't really feel close at any point. You know, you look at the final score, they only lost this game by 9 points to the number 2 team in the country. I mean, there's nothing but good things to say about what Colorado came here and did. I mean, I think you ask a lot of people, they shouldn't have been here in this, playing on this day. They should have been back in Boulder by now, but they fought, and they fought to the very end. Credit to the seniors who were fighting for every last second they could get on that team. And, I mean, now Tad's got a group of guys that have bought into his culture, and I think that's going to build a great base for the future. Sebastian Ranchik was saying post-game that he is excited to become a leader on this team, especially alongside Bangot Dak, and I expect those two to grow exponentially in the next couple of years and really becomes the new faces of Buffs basketball.
Yeah, I definitely think so, and that's super important and crucial in this day and age of NIL and the transfer portal. But, you know, as we said, the Buffs fell in this one. Emmanuel Sharp, he had 19 points in this one. Like I said, he didn't play in that first contest, and it was kind of interesting because Juwan Roberts, he had 20 points in that first contest. He did not play in this one. He did not play in the second half of this one, exiting due to injury. He only had 2 points in the first half. It was a big game from the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, Joseph Tugler. He dominated on the defensive end, holding the Buffs outside of Andre Yakimovsky, who's one of the seniors that, you know, you brought up. He had 25 points, a season high, and 4 threes. But, you know, the Buffs came up short. Is there anything that is on your mind heading into this offseason? Any players that you want to keep? Anybody in the transfer? I mean, no one has really entered the transfer portal quite yet, but what are your thoughts heading forward? I know you guys have kind of touched on already, but...
Yeah, I think, you know, looking forward, Colorado obviously is going to need to find some more consistency within shooting. I don't know if that's a developmental thing. You give guys more practice. You know, we have a lot of young freshmen on the team, and I think that was one of the exciting things. You know, Felix Casares, especially coming out, he kind of had a breakthrough, I would say, throughout this tournament, just on the defensive end and what he provides to the Buffs there. But I think you got to build on that, build on the defense, build on the fundamentals, build on Tad Boyle, Buffalo's basketball. That's what we're going to have to do, and they're going to have to find people that fit this culture. You know, post-game, Julian Hammond talked about that. Even the new guys that transferred in this offseason, they're able to click, they're able to gel and plug in almost like they've been there all 4 years, just like he was. And I think that's something they're going to need to continue to find, and it's going to make out for what should be an exciting offseason.
Yeah, and, you know, I think the transfer portal isn't something that the Buffaloes are going to be dipping into too much. It's what Tad's spoken on. He said it's not a huge goal of his. He's not going to be dipping into it all that much. They got 5 incoming freshmen who I think are going to bring a lot of talent to this roster, but I think retention is the biggest thing. They've started to build in the right direction. They've got these guys now getting experience in this tournament, and the way that some of those guys have played down the stretch of the season, the development we saw in the likes of Ronchik and Bangot Dak and then Casares in this tournament as well. I mean, that's super encouraging for the future of this team. And if you're able to retain all those young guys and, maybe bring in one or two pieces from the portal, you don't have to bring in a whole lot, especially, there's not a whole lot of gaps in the starting lineup, I feel like, at this point. You want to get these guys minutes. You want to get them developing. And then you got the new freshmen in who you'd like to see if you can get them some play time. I think that retention is going to be the biggest key. And I think they're just going to keep building on it if they can keep these guys around. And as long as they're able to do that, this culture is going to continue to grow and thrive.
Yeah, I definitely think so. We already talked about Bangad Dak, Sebastian Ranchik. You brought up the 5 incoming freshmen for next year. But, I mean, even guys like R.J. Smith, a redshirt sophomore this season, he came up big in this tournament, especially shooting the ball. He showed up late down the stretch after, kind of hitting a cold stretch down the streak of the season. You brought up Felix Caceres as well. So, a lot of bright spots for the Colorado after a disappointing season. But, looking at Houston, even though, one downside for them was Juwan Roberts. That will be something that they'll have to monitor as far as whatever lower leg injury that was. But Joseph Tugler, a great game. Emmanuel Sharp, a great game. Milos Uzan, he showed up in the second half. I think he had 14 points at 2 big threes. So, they have a lot of momentum heading into tomorrow. But looking at the other games, we started off today with Iowa State versus BYU. Then after Colorado versus talking about Colorado versus Houston. We saw Texas Tech versus Baylor, and to end it off, we had an exciting game of Kansas versus Arizona. Which game stood out to you?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we got to talk about that opening shooting performance by both teams in the Iowa State and Baylor game. BYU game. Both of these teams came out hot. And not only that, they put up the best three-point shooting performance from a combined effort of two teams ever in the Big 12 championships, which is pretty impressive considering how long that great basketball has been being played in the Big 12. And it kind of shows you just the shift into the modern era of basketball. How valuable is the three-point shot to these teams? And I think that was why BYU was able to come out with a victory today.
Yeah, BYU with Kevin Young at the helm, getting hired this past offseason from the Phoenix Suns. He's brought an NBA-style offense, and he's recruited as such. And they've shot the three-point ball a ton this season, and they've made it a ton this season. We saw it happen at the U Event Center, and they've ran the Buffaloes out of the building on late Tuesday night. But today we saw it as well. But Iowa State, they put up a good fight. It came up just short, and after they've kind of had an up-and-down season. But Liam, you could speak on that game more, but does any of the other games stand out for you?
Yeah, I think any of the other games standing out, I think that the Texas Tech and Baylor game was an interesting one because that game ended up finishing very close. It came down to the wire, and the late second half made it a very interesting game. I think if you'd asked me at halftime if that game would be at the top of my list for most exciting ones, I would have thought you were about crazy because you got Texas Tech led the entire game. They were up 15 at one point in the first half over Baylor, and Baylor brought it right back. I'm going to go ahead and mention my MVP of the night, Norchad Omier of the Baylor Bears, on the losing team, but the ability, what he provided for his team was absolutely incredible today. He had 29 points, 15 total rebounds. I mean, that is a serious performance, and he put the team on his back, and he brought them all the way back and gave them a chance in that game, which also kind of leads me to my second point, which is my most disappointing team of the night is Baylor. Despite his performance, not being able to take advantage of a struggling Texas Tech offense late in that game and not being able to build around the performance he gave, that is, while there wasn't a lot of actual disappointment in the games today, I think all the teams played incredibly well, and there weren't really any that shot below my expectations. I think that's a little disheartening that's a bit of a disheartening way to be let out of this tournament when you're having one of your guys giving you that type of performance and the rest of the players aren't able to build around it. That's an unfortunate thing to have, and especially when you're going up against a top-tier team like Texas Tech.
Yeah, no, definitely. Norchad Omier, he's been one of the best players in the Big 12. He's a newcomer this season, and so his impact has been felt, especially with Baylor dealing with some injuries down the stretch. And VJ Edgecombe being just a freshman, he's shown up in a lot of games, but it's also been somewhat not tough to rely on him necessarily, but he is still a young kid. He's a freshman, and so he's dealing with things. And, we saw the final shot coming down to, the ball in his hands. He shot a running floater from the wing for the win from deep, and just missed that one. Texas Tech was able to hold on. We saw JT Toppin that he got honored with the Big 12 Player of the Year, so that was super cool to see. But we finished it off with Kansas versus Arizona, and we saw Kansas take an L in front of was basically a home crowd, although we heard the U of A chants at the end. What stood out in that game for the both of you?
Yeah, I think maybe one of the things that stood out was what maybe Hunter Dickinson didn't do. He had a couple of uncharacteristic turnovers, uncharacteristic misses, especially a dunk late that I think could have helped spark energy, sparked a run late in that second half. And missing shots like that, turning over the ball, doesn't help your team, but I think it's something he's going to have to learn and can grow from, as Kansas is going to most likely be dancing at March Madness next week.
Yeah, Dickinson, a two-time All-American, and he was a Big 12 Newcomer of the Year last year. He had some tough plays, but, he still put up a decent production, battling with Henry Visar and the Arizona Bigs. But, what's that in that game for you?
Yeah, for me, I first want to just mention, my MVP prediction of the day was going to be KJ Adams. I mentioned he was going to need to have a big game if they were going to win, and he did not have a big game. He was all but absent from really any aspect of the game for Kansas, and it showed, it reflected in the final score. They were missing him even just off the boards. He was not. He grabbed a few rebounds, but he was not able to get into the double digits, which is what they were going to need from him if he was going to help push them over the edge. Dickinson provided the scoring, but he also finished below double digits scoring, and it just wasn't. It wasn't a very eventful night for him. And they were going to need him in this game. But primarily, I want to acknowledge the Arizona shooting. I mean, they performed like a top tier shooting team in the country tonight. They were upwards of 60% shooting on three-pointers for the entire night, and that's incredible. And at one point, I believe it got as high as 83% in the first half, which is that's incredible shooting. They were and they outmatched Kansas's size with their shooting today, and they just displayed some incredible offensive prowess. And it's going to be interesting to see how that stacks up in the semifinals of this tournament.
Yeah, definitely. They shot over 50% from the field. They're really getting whatever they want on offense. We saw that down the stretch as they converted. I think it was 5 straight field goals, 6 straight field goals. As Kansas started to rely on shots from the perimeter, they were able to knock down a few. DeJuan Harris hit a big shot, but Zeke Mayo, he missed a few shots, and Kansas, kind of shot themselves out of this one. They really just couldn't overcome Arizona's red-hot shooting. But as we mentioned in this preview for today, Arizona is pretty streaky, especially with Caleb Love. So we'll have to see if that carries into tomorrow for day 4, where the semifinals of the Big 12 Championship will tip off here at 6 p.m. local time, so 5 p.m. Mountain time. The semifinals will tip off, I think, on national television on ESPN and ESPN2. So I think we're going to do play-by-play for that one. We're going to see what other content we're going to do, because the Buffs are unfortunately not on their fun Cinderella run for this tournament. But, a lot of stuff packed up for tomorrow. We're chugging through this. It's been a fun experience. So my name's Oliver Hayes, with Bus Stampede alongside Lee Rivera, Liam Howard from Scuba Sports. And as always, you heard it here first.